Welcome to the first episode of Diverse Voices United Futures, where stories of impact, identity, and inspiration come to life. We're here to share stories of advocacy, identity, leadership, and the power of being present in the spaces that shape our communities. This podcast will shine a light on the voices of past Diveristy Youth Fellowship alumni and the community leaders who helped bring the program to life.
We created this space to highlight the journeys, challenges, and victories of those who stepped into public service through the fellowship. In each episode, we'll explore how lived experience fuels leadership and how the work continues beyond City Hall.
For our first episode, we're honored to speak with the founders of the fellowship, Nora, Hindy, and Mohammed, Hashim, to learn more about how the fellowship started, why it matters, and where it's going. This is a space for reflection, connection, and celebration, and we're just getting started. Join us as we trace the journey from idea to impact and hear from the voices that are shaping tomorrow.
To kick things off, we would like to introduce Nora Hindy, one of the co-founders of the Diveristy Youth Fellowship. Nora Hindy is an educator, academic policy advocate, and community organizer based in the Greater Toronto Area. With over 20 years of experience in the public education system and a deep commitment to equity, she co-founded the Diveristy Youth Fellowship to address the glaring underrepresentation of racialized youth in local politics. Motivated by witnessing the exclusion of Muslim and marginalized communities from decision-making spaces, especially during moments of heightened political Islamophobia, Nora was driven to create a program that would serve as both a platform for empowerment and a long-term investment in representative leadership. She believes deeply in building space where young people are not just included, but where they are positioned to lead, influence, and shape policy. Today, she continues this work as a director at a post-secondary institution and through her ongoing research and advocacy.
Joining Nora is fellow co-founder Mohammed, whose leadership and passion for empowering racialized youth helped bring the idea of the fellowship to reality. Mohammed is the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of the Canadian Race Relations Foundation and has worked as a human rights advocate in Canada for the past 2 decades. He has a multidisciplinary career working in non-for-profits, community organizations, the labor movement as a communication consultant, and in government. His work has primarily focused on innovation in public policy and legislation to improve the lives of Canadians. A keen advocate and strategic leader, Mohammed has contributed to numerous legislative and policy agendas to address racism and hate in Canada. Nora and Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us today to kick off the Diverse Youth Fellowship Alumni Podcast. We will now begin with our very first question, where we want you to take us back in time to the origin of the Diverse Youth Fellowship. What was that spark that started it all?
Mohammed, do you want to start?
Well, thank you. Sure. So thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be supporting this podcast and helping be part of the first episode too. Wow. Um, the idea wasn't ours. Um, the idea came, as all good things, from the basement of a mosque, where in 2014, or maybe sorry, 2015, early in the year in 2015, we got a small grant from the Laidlaw Foundation to bring Muslim youth together to talk about what they were hoping to see understood and represented and from their view in the federal election that was supposed to happen in October of 2015. And through that grant, we organized a series of consultations of Muslim youth in a mosque basement in Mississauga, in a location that was very difficult to get to. But 50 people showed up and they talked about their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, and what was important to them in the federal election. And what was very glaringly obvious was their sense of distance from representation in politics. They felt like people couldn't hear them, their issues were being ignored, that they didn't see people representing them who looked like them, and they felt a distance towards that. So the fellowship was created in response to that because the problems that they identified and the solutions came from those Muslim youth. And we were just folks who had worked on it and said, okay, here, this is a great idea. Let's operationalize it. But it actually started from youth.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nora, if you would like to add anything to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, just a little bit, there's a lot of engagement, and I started volunteering around that time of the 2015 federal election. And actually, that's where I met Mohammed, Hashim, and we, then he's talking about, like, as he talks about the grant and all these other things that we were all a part of, due to the fact that real things were happening that were impacting us, and we didn't have that voice, right? And the origin, I would say, really comes back to that question of why aren't we in the room where decisions are being made? For me, on a personal level as well, there was this fear of what was happening to the Muslim community. What I will say is that what's very important about this program was that most of everything we were doing at that time, and even continue to do, was really around putting out fires. We don't want this person voted in, or we don't want that. And we created events and planned events and advocated. But that idea of having a legacy piece, something that's long term, was at least new for me and for a lot of people in those spaces, and was also really exciting because it's moving beyond that fight for survival and looking at creating and investing in long-term infrastructure that could create that generational change. And I will be honest, we started really small, and there was times where we thought it was never really going to happen, but the right people came together. And like Mohammed said, it was the young people who came together with the idea and that energy and effort, and magic happened.
Amazing. Thank you so much for providing that background information. So I know this is probably crazy to hear, but the idea was conceived in 2015. It is now 2025. It's been about 10 years now. And I know the program formally started as the Muslim Youth Fellowship. So I know you both have highlighted a bit about this, but is there a specific reason why that community was the starting point, and how did it grow to include other communities?
Yeah, I could start. I had the program. So I'll start because it was a revelation to myself as well. So the program did begin as the Muslim Youth Fellowship, and that's why you'll hear, sometimes that being used interchangeably with Diveristy Youth Fellowship. But it was actually intentional and strategic. So as I mentioned, at that time, the political climate was steeped in Islamophobic rhetoric, around the 2015 election. And there was a real need to create a space for Muslim youth who were the ones that were being politicized and targeted, so that they could actually step into political life with agency and support. So, it's about flipping the script. At that time, the niqab debate and things like that were happening, and we wanted to flip the script. So that was part of the reason why it was Muslim youth focused. And I learned from Mohammed that in terms of raising funds, having an identity-based program often attracts more funding from community. So that was very insightful, very valuable knowledge to have. And that's what we did, to create that strong foundation that's, financially and in terms of the program that we were offering. But from the very beginning, we knew that the goal wasn't to create a program only for Muslim youth, and that the vision was that we would grow and create like a scalable model that would support racialized and underrepresented youth more broadly. And that's why when the time came, we approached Urban Alliance on Race Relations to take it on. As an organization, their legacy and credibility and the work they do in anti-racism make them the ideal partner to take this on. And I have to say that seeing Diveristy Youth Fellowship flourish under Urban Alliance has been incredible. And to know that it's gone far beyond what we imagined when we were having these sessions, and knowing that also that it's stayed true to the fact that it's still community driven, strategic, and future focused.
I said, just to add to that, it was always the intention for it to be not just Muslim Youth Fellowship. It was always intended to growing from that. And when we created the Black Youth Fellowship after the Muslim Youth Fellowship, I mean, the story of that is amazing, but like at City Council. But we had, the first reason why we did the Muslim Youth Fellowship was because it was a community response. Like Muslims felt like they were disconnected. So we worked within the community to figure out how do we bridge that gap. And to be frank, it wasn't easy. Like there were city councilors who were asking us, why Muslims only? Like, why should this be a program only for Muslims? And like our answer is because this is a community that's feeling targeted, that's feeling hurt, that needs support. And to be frank, this is more about youth development and building an aspiration to serve, either as public servants or within the public service. And our goal was not necessarily just to get Muslims in, but it was to grow the capacity of a community to see their capacity to contribute to Canada and to the city. So the goal was never just to make it. And as Nora said, we strategically chose the Urban Alliance on Race Relations because even though we wanted to originally keep it in a Muslim-led organization, the strategic decision to keep it in Urban Alliance particularly was because there was always an intention to expand it.
So thank you so much for both of your insights. That was really, really great. So in our Diversity Youth Fellowship toolkit and at a few of our organization's events, I've personally heard this quote that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Could you possibly both elaborate on this and how that idea influenced your vision for Diversity Youth Fellowship? Mohammed, I might pick on you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. I mean, that's a bit of a crass statement, to say the least. But I think it's a precautionary tale to say, like power will always have a table. Like the table of power will always exist. Whether you have a seat on it is dependent upon your determination to be there. And evoking that sense of determination and entitlement. And I use that word as a strong word to say in that sense, but is one that is deserving for all Canadians. And I think that people need to see that as true. And our job was just to basically very visually display that. I remember talking to some of the fellows from the first cohort when they came back, and they were saying, walking into that second hall on City Hall felt like a kick in the gut. Like we had just kind of landed in a space where we have to like sound a certain way, be a certain way, act a certain way that was different from how we perceived us. And we were like, yes, that's true. Welcome to the table. Welcome to that table. And either you're going to swim with it or you're going to feel demoralized by it. We're here to walk with you to make sure that you're strong enough to believe that you deserve to be at that table. But if you feel like it's too much, then that's okay too.
Thank you. Nora, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I know, I agree. That sentence is a stark reminder that that if we're not present where decisions are being made, that decisions are still being made, and often in ways that don't reflect our needs or our voices. So from the beginning, like the youth fellowship was designed with focus, like I said, as the long-term impact. We knew that we're not going to see immediate shift in who holds power, like as Mohammed described with that, just that like shock of entering into those spaces. But again, it's the fact that this work is generational and that we're trying to build a foundation, like a pipeline for racialized youth to not only access political spaces, but hopefully to eventually reshape them. The program wasn't really about just resume building, right? It's about planting seeds, creating that environment where youth can imagine themselves not just as participants, but as like when they do walk those halls, they can say, those who get over the shock and are able to like swim, as Mohammed was mentioning, they can see themselves as future like campaign directors, policy advisors, even elected officials. And that kind of systemic change doesn't happen overnight. So, when I think about that quote, I think about what will the tables look like in 5, 10, 20 years from now? I do think, like you mentioned, it's been 10 years and a reflective piece has have the people at the table changed and we're again always looking forward and always hoping that things will, keep doing this work because it's about creating those future possibilities. And if we stop the work, then the table will look very different.
Thank you both. So I do want to build upon what you've been discussing, especially in relation to the table and what it looks like to have representation at the table. So representation in political institutions is something that continues to grow in Toronto and across Canada. As a youth fellowship focused on empowering racialized communities through political engagement, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in launching the very first cohort?
You want me to take that? I could take that. Money. We didn't have any money, so we
Mm-hmm.
had to figure out how to raise money. That was number one. But thankfully, we have a very generous community that was supremely helpful. But also, to be honest, like we had a really great, willing partner. The city of Toronto, through the SDFA office, I think Denise Campbell used to run it back then. But now I think she's now the deputy city manager, and her office contributed $10,000 as seed money for it the first year, which was all the money that we got from City Hall. And then, but we had really great partners at the clerk's office. I think she was a deputy clerk. Kelly McCarthy was very helpful. Leslie Raskika, maybe. She also worked at the city clerk's office. So they really helped us administratively iron out all the different pieces. We thought this was going to be a political nightmare to have to manage. But getting it approved to council, getting it approved through the city budget, getting it approved was like very, very helpful. We were very, very much assisted by the city clerk's office, who honestly saw it as an opportunity to engage youth in a thoughtful way. That's different. There had been other fellowships that were created that did not go very well at the city. So they knew that a different way of doing this may be an option for them. There was a Indigenous fellowship that existed. There was a fellowship for women in particular that existed. I think some of them had persisted for a little bit of time and gone away, but this program was the one that stuck around, mostly because I think it wasn't just a city-run initiative. It was a city community partnership where like the community brought in ideas and thoughts and concerns and chose and did a lot of work around training and recruiting that that made a lot of sense. So I mean, honestly, like I don't think there was many. I mean, I'm sugarcoating it when I said there were not many barriers. There was a lot of painful moments to create anything new. But to be honest, working in the bureaucracy now, it was not nearly as painful as my regular day is. So then thinking about it now, I'm like, oh, that actually was a lot more seamless.
It's true hindsight, yes. Oh my God. I agree. Money was a huge part. I will say that, Mohammed single-handedly carried the political side in terms of, getting City Hall on board. And I had the responsibility of the fellowship side with the applicants and creating the website, having those things come up, reviewing applications. And the reason why I say money was a big part because a hurdle and then at the point of ease. There was a point where, I was working full time and then just doing this like evenings, weekends, just times that I could find. And, Mohammed was doing all this heavy lifting and then he would say, okay, I need you to do this, this, this. And I'm like, how am I going to do it? And that first time where Mohammed said, we can hire someone. Oh my God, that really is what made all of this happen, is having that resource. And I remember meeting this person and like begging them, please, and they wanted to because it's a job, but I couldn't see it like that. I was just like, nothing is going to get done if I don't have someone to help that would take on, full-time hours. And we did it. So that money that was able to hire that resource really got it off the ground, because even if City Halls, yeah, we could take people on, but then there's no one to take on because that half of the work is not being done. So that really was like on my side was really what got it off the floor. I still remember looking at applications over the summer, and I was blown away at the people who were applying, and I was like, this is real. These are real people that are coming. And we got to have something ready for them because they're like, yes, we want to do this. So yeah, it just really goes to show that like having that funding and that support through resources is crucial, especially for something that we're starting from scratch.
They were so shocked when they first came.
Yeah.
They were so shocked when they first came. I remember Hasib.
I remember. Was he in John Tory's office?
No. He was. I can't. No, I think he was in Paul Ainsley's office. I think.
Okay.
But he doesn't know this, but we held our orientation session at the offices of Norton Rose Fulbright, which is like a very, very, very fancy law
Yes.
firm downtown. So
I mean, I was working full time, but I was working in the public sector. And when I entered that office, I was like, what world have I stepped into here? What is this?
and
Imagine like the youth, right?
here's a 19-year-old Hashim going up to the security guy, and he's like, hi, I'm here for the Muslim Youth Fellowship. And the security guy is like, welcome, sir, come follow me. And then they take him to the elevator, and he's like, yeah, you're gonna go up to the 70th floor or something like that. And I'm like, I'm with him, so they let me up too. And then he walks into like the office of Norton Rose, and he's like, hi, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be here, but like my name's Hasib. And the person says, welcome, Mr. Hassan. We are expecting you. You're down in that room over there, and pointed him down. And then he walks in there and he's getting gold-plated coffee in the offices of
Yeah.
Norton Rose. And people were just like, what in the world did we just walk into? But in that, we did that on purpose. We did that on purpose because we wanted them to feel ease in a place of power. Because like, let's be frank here, not a lot of us get to go hang out in the offices of Norton Rose Fulbright or Tories, or where we use all the law offices to do all our trainings because we wanted to shock them, to say like, you belong in these crazy rich spaces. And the speakers that we brought in were crazy. They were high profile, like super successful campaigners, city councilors, former MPs, ministers, to just have candid chats with them. And we held and so it was a shock to them, but we did that intentionally because like we thought the more we expose them to being at the table, the more they'll feel comfortable being there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing the challenges and being so transparent and sharing that approach of kind of giving the youth a new, I guess, point of view of where they should be and how, like, places that they can be. I guess this kind of follows into our next question of how the fellowship has been around for almost a decade, and we've entered our 8th year with diverse cohorts. So just over the years, what has surprised you most about the fellows, and any moments that deeply moved or inspired you?
Okay. Honestly, it just comes down to the fellows who have applied and have gone through the program. I remember I was mentioning like just reading the applications, and I was thinking, wow, these are not just promising young people, they're already doing the work. And that really hit our goal of it wasn't that we were, going to bring these people and we're going to change them and have them learn how to do things and that they wouldn't already know. They weren't waiting to be like quote unquote activated. They were already deeply engaged. They just weren't in these spaces, right? Where that work is just as essential. They just needed that access, like Mohammed was saying, opening their doors to like, law offices on the 60th floor, right? Having their networks expanded, opportunities to bring in their skills and like vision into like political spaces. And like I mentioned, it wasn't like just an opportunity for them to resume build. And I still see that. Like I still see that this program is really a chance for the youth to serve, to challenge the systems from within, and to learn how to be effective in spaces that weren't designed for them. Right? They're really working against the grain, but they do it. They show up and they have that courage to go into those spaces. I mean, it's easy for me to talk about it as someone who was, already like established, but I don't know how I would have been as a young person going into those spaces. So I'm constantly in awe and humbled, watching their experience, and how they're shaping this program and how it's expanded and all the different types of identities and people that are able to access it. So even what you just said earlier about it being 10 years, that has actually surprised me because I didn't think it's been that long, and it's still growing strong. So yeah, I'm very, very inspired by the youth in this program for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't maybe not acknowledge this too much, but I do LinkedIn creep many of the old fellows. I do. I'd be like, hey, what is this person up to these days? Whoa, check that out. You know, like that proud uncle thingamajig. But we'll never call them and say it, right? We'll just well,
Like the aunties.
there's no need to do that. But I keep it looking. Oh, you started a job at the UN? Wow, check you out, girl. Like, so I definitely do that. I would also just say that um our contribution in terms of the program was nothing other than to help them feel like they were powerful. I just wanted them to take that, to believe that they had power. That's all I wanted, because I think sometimes people don't think that is the case. But to be frank, like I think now that I've seen like 10 years from where it kind of started, or at least 7 years of it running, um, like some of the people who have graduated are doing insane stuff. Insane stuff. Like I feel like I think all of us have changed. I've changed certainly. I think I've learned so much from seeing how like what I actually wanted people to do and what they ended up doing and what they are doing now today. Um, like if I were to kind of line up what I was hoping for them to do versus what they're actually doing, I think I would be like I would tell myself of 7 years ago how to not say what I was saying back then in order to help them see more of a possibility than I ever saw. So it's continuous. Like I'm and honestly like I think that like we're blessed with a community of folks who are just amazingly gritty and alive. And the first cohort, I think we had at least 9 out of the 13 who were Black or Somali or Black Muslims, because we were going through a lot of difficulty in the northern half of the city. And we recognized that, and you know, we had members who were Somali or Sudanese or others who knew that this was an area that City Hall needed to understand better and recruited fellows to authentically convey that. And it was extremely valuable because um, they were able to bring perspectives. And in fact, I would say the perception of expectations changed more for city councilors than it did for the fellows. We created the program so that the fellows could dream, the fellows could feel power. But what ended up happening was that counselors said, "Oh my God, maybe I can hire people who look different, who I don't need to trust the way I felt like I needed to trust like my people to be in this space." There's a litmus test of loyalty before like a city councilor will hire somebody into their sphere of trust. And I think the Muslim Youth Fellowship cracked those expectations. Because I can tell you when I first started working at City Council in 2016, of the 250 staff that were working on the second floor, working for councilors and the mayor, I would say no more than 24 of them were racialized. And Councillor Morley's, Asma's, and Bravo's office alone at this point. You know, more people work in those offices for racialized communities than the entire floor did back then.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That adds a lot of perspective into how the Diversity Youth Fellowship program has really done the work that it intended to do. And it's inspiring to see to this day that we are expanding into territories beyond Toronto. And it's really inspiring to see that this work is being replicated in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan. And I want to ask you both, given that context, what do you hope this program looks like in 5 years?
I have a very clear vision of it because I have financially planned for this in my budget as part of our business plan, because we have basically made offers to cities across this country to bankroll this at $25,000 a year if they were to take on an initiative wherever they're taking an initiative. And we're trying to like meet between 2 to 5 municipalities every year. So we'll see where there's opportunity, and I know my staff have met with city councilors in Halifax recently to see if it's a possibility. And Saskatoon, Edmonton already exists, but there's lots of opportunities for these to exist in different places, and we're hoping to work with them to get there. But I do think that some cities will look at this as how do we help youth get jobs, which is a problem because the point of the program was never how to help get, I mean, that's a decent outcome,
Yeah.
but that's one outcome. But the real outcome was how do we get people who have never felt like they belong to be in those spaces to become part of those spaces. So it was more about a relationship to power versus a job acquisition program.
That's great to hear that there's an expansion plan, because as much as it's growing across the big cities in Canada, I really hope in the next 5 years that all the cities and all the municipalities in the GTA would have it. I live in Mississauga, and just seeing city council there, I'm wondering, Mohammed, what that floor looks like, right? I've never walked into that area, but the amount of racialized people in Mississauga and the lack of representation, and I'm sure that's the same across all of the municipalities in the GTA. I'd really love to see it happening there to change the face. Like, I mean, traditionally, racialized communities are a lot more engaged in federal and provincial levels, right? Due to, portfolios that speak to the people, whether it's immigration or healthcare, education, and municipalities and the trustee offices, trustees of education are so skewed in the sense that they are not representative at all. And it's places where they have such a huge impact on the racialized communities that they serve, but that voice is definitely missing. So hoping that it really expands to those areas as well.
Thank you so much for both sharing your visions. I definitely agree that although we are expanding the fellowship to various provinces, including Manitoba and maybe even Nova Scotia, I think focusing in the GTA would be a great step forward as well, especially in regions where they might not have that representation in the municipalities. So now for our final question. We are currently in the process of recruiting 4 cohorts of the Diveristy Youth Fellowship. If you both could speak directly to a young person who's unsure about applying, maybe they don't feel qualified or they don't think they have the experiences, what would you tell them?
I mean, that's such a great question. What would you tell your younger self? In a way, I think that, look, um, I'll just tell you this. The first time I walked into city councilor's office, I was scared. I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen. What kind of face do I have to put on? Do I have to put on my white person voice? Well, sir, how do you do today? What do I do here? Do I have to tone switch? Do I not? The first time I walked into the mayor's office, I had a meeting with the mayor. I was like, wow, oh my God, like what am I doing? First time I had a meeting with the premier, I felt like, oh my God, what am I doing here? I'm in like the first time I walked into the governor general's house. I'm like, what? This place is crazy. First time I met my minister, I was sweating. Like I report to a minister. Like the first time I walked into the prime minister's office and had a one-on-one conversation with him, I was I was really scared. But you know what? I'm not scared anymore. And I think that sometimes these places are intimidating because they look so far away. But if a poor kid from Clarkson who grew up in a basement apartment, his mom and a sister, and whose dad drove a cab, can one day brief the Prime Minister of Canada, then you can too.
Yeah.
So look, what's scary is not to be afraid of. Like the only voice that's going to tell you not to do it is your own. So tell it to shut up and believe and you believe that you belong there.
Yeah. I would say that you're part of something powerful, something that as much as you are unsure and scared, I mean, we as the creators of the program were unsure and we just did it and we went ahead and we did it. You know, without the resources that eventually did come. And it's something that's built to last. And again, it's not just about politics, it's about creating space for your voice, for your leadership, and that your leadership and your lived experience is something that is very much needed in the city, in the province, across the whole country. You know, this program is about disrupting systems that weren't built with us in mind and daring to imagine what it looks like. And we won't be able to imagine what it looks like if young people don't keep coming and being part of this program. And as Mohammed said, it changed what we thought it was and what the fellows thought it was. And that's the beauty and the richness of the program. And ultimately, you're doing it for your community. So when you join, your communities get stronger and better because of the work that you would be doing. And no one is going to carry this legacy if it's not for the young people, right? We did it, we created it, and now it's up to you to carry it on.
I'll just, if I may just say one last thing, if possible. Look, you know, as Muslims, and I'm a Muslim, you know, we give zakat, which is charitable giving. But not everybody gets to give zakat because some are in financial capacities that are too difficult to do so. But giving is a tremendous honor. And, you know, when I think about my mom, who worked at a bank at the back office doing administrative work for 20 something years. And like, did she have time to go volunteer? The answer is no, because she had to work late to get overtime to make sure that we paid the mortgage. Like, did she have the opportunities to contribute to society? She got to vote. It's the only time she had to do. So, I was born here. My generation has benefited from the sacrifices of my parents and the remarkable opportunity I have had to contribute and provide to the public service in this country is honestly a remarkable opportunity because not everybody gets to contribute to society, to give back to Canada, to give back to the land, to commit to, you know, a better future. Like we're an evolving project in this country. This country is an evolving project. I mean, we have to acknowledge the wrongs of the past, but be committed to improving the future. And this program is a gateway, is a superhighway for you to enter into the world of giving back to this country and to give back to the public service, to be part of that public service. And we hope that, you know, the program inspires you to do so because it is intended as an opportunity for you to give and not just take.
Thank you for that, Mohammed. That was very insightful. And thank you, Nora, for sharing as well. So that does bring us to the end of our very first episode. I want to say a huge thank you again to you, Nora Hindy, and Mohammed Hashim for sharing their stories, insights, and the heart behind the Diversity Youth Fellowship. And thank you to you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey. We hope you're leaving inspired and with a deeper understanding of how representation and community-driven leadership can shape more inclusive futures.
Keep an eye out for our next episodes where we'll be speaking with the alumni from across different cohorts about the work they've done and how the fellowship helped shape their path in advocacy, leadership, and beyond. Until next time, this is Diverse Voices, United Futures, where stories of impact, identity, and inspiration come to life. Thank you.